Okay, so we are now live on the webcast. So thank you all for attending this meeting of Cabinet. While this meeting is open to the public, it is being recorded and broadcast live on the County Council's website and will be available for repeat viewing. It may also be recorded and filmed by the press and public. Filming or recording is only permitted in this room whilst the meeting is taking place, so must stop when the meeting is either adjourned or closed. Filming is not permitted elsewhere in the building at any time. Also, we are not expecting a fire drill, but in the event there is a fire alarm, please vacate via the main reception or via one of the emergency exits across the hall. Before we move straight into the first agenda item, I think it's I would like to sort of thank Kevin Greenhoff. And Kevin Greenhoff has been looking after Cabinet, the Democratic Service, for a very long time. This is his last Cabinet meeting. So I'd just like to say, well done, Kevin. And he did talk about having a party, so I'm not sure quite why. But well done, Kevin, and thank you for all the work that you have done previously. I think you're doing a legal apprenticeship, as I understand, and you will be moving there over to the legal fairly soon. Would you like to say anything or not, Kevin? Having said I wouldn't ask you, I now have.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, everyone. It's been a great experience looking after your Cabinet meetings for all these years, and although I'm looking forward to my future and hopefully becoming a solicitor, it's been a great experience being part of all this, and I'm sure that will stand me in good stead going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I say thank you for all you've done. But also, Joe Weeks is here, sat at the back over there, and Joe will be taking over that role in future. So welcome to you, Joe, as well. I look forward to working with you in the future. Okay, so we will now move into the agenda. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Don't mess up now, Kevin.
Thank you, Chairman. We've got apologies from Councillor North.
Okay, thank you for that. No for anybody else. Declarations of interest. Anybody have any declarations of interest? No, can't see any of those. Thank you very much. Confirmation, agenda item 3, confirmation of the minutes. Does anybody have any objections, amendments, or any comments on the minutes from the previous meeting? No? Okay, so we can take those that the minutes are agreed and are, excuse me, as a correct record. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to go straight on to Chairman's announcements. And I will apologise. I think quite a few of us have coughs and colds at the moment, and I can assure everybody that it is just a cough. Everybody gets worried. So apologies if I have to pause at any point through my Chairman's announcements. So first of all, I would like to make a comment about the current situation regarding the prevalence of Strep A infections across the UK and the tragic news of the death of a child attending one of our Hampshire schools. Firstly, I would like to express my sincere and heartfelt condolences to the family, friends and local school community of the child concerned. While I understand from our Director of Public Health that serious illness from Strep A infections is relatively rare, the death of even a single child is one too many. I have been reassured to learn that comprehensive information has been provided by the local authority and the UK Health Security Agency to schools, early year settings and colleges across the county to support staff to respond appropriately. This includes letters to parents and carers on the signs and symptoms, as well as advice on when to seek medical help. I understand that this is a worrying time for parents and carers. Please be assured that our public health team continues to monitor the situation across Hampshire and work closely with the NHS and UK Health Security Agency. The team will ensure that, whenever and wherever required, support is provided to educational settings and local communities to manage outbreaks. Excuse me. We will also continue to actively signpost parents and carers to the latest sources of information and advice. I would like to thank our public health team for their continued response to this concerning situation and encourage everyone to do all they can to prevent the spread of this respiratory infections. Good hand hygiene and keeping away from others if you feel unwell is simple advice, but sometimes we can do all we can do to protect ourselves and the people around us. I'd also like to comment on the current situation on bird flu in the county. In the past week, we have 2 confirmed cases of avian flu in kept birds within Hampshire. One relates to the penguins in Marwell Zoo, while the other case was found in a bird kept near Highclere. Officers from the Animal and Plant Health Agency are dealing with both infected premises. This year has seen the worst number of infections in the UK. So unfortunately, it was probably inevitable that the county would experience an outbreak. Our trading standards and emergency planning teams are working together to ensure that owners of kept birds in designated 3-kilometre monitoring zones around each premises are identified as quickly as possible, so that checks can be made and on any further infections. They are being identified using a combination of physical visits and letters together with other localised publicity. I would like to thank both the teams for their work responding to the confirmed cases and their efforts to prevent further outbreaks. Excuse me. Coming on to other announcements, I was very pleased to see that the Solent Freeport was one of the first UK freeports to receive final government approval last week, which means it is now fully operational. This is excellent news, as the official designation of the Solent Freeport will now help to accelerate an enhanced investment already underway at key sites. The Solent Freeport is a major economic opportunity that will help create jobs, regenerate communities, and increase prosperity in the Solent and wider Hampshire area. I would like to congratulate everyone involved in putting such a strong case to government that culminated in last week's historic announcement. Finally, I'd just like to make an announcement in terms of the new County Council Cabinet portfolios. So I would like to recognise that the next time we meet as a Cabinet in 2023, the faces around the table will remain the same, but many of us will have different portfolios as part of the new executive member structure. These changes are being made to ensure the County Council is strongly placed to respond to present and future challenges and fulfil our ambitions for the county as described in our Hampshire 2050 vision. For anyone watching who would like to know what the revised portfolios are, please have a look at the new section on the County Council's website where an announcement was made on the 24th of November. That is the end of my leader's announcements. So we now go on to agenda item 5, deputations. As I understand, there are no deputations on this occasion. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, we will move straight on to agenda item 6, financial update and budget setting proposals, cash limits 23-24. And I think Rob Kye, are going to present the paper. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Good morning, members. As the executive summary suggests, this would normally be a straightforward report where we'd present the cash limits for next year and the capital guidelines for the next 3 years. Obviously, we are responding to significant inflationary and growth pressures over this year, which is having a profound impact on next year's budget setting process. We've also got the impact of the autumn statement to take into account. So this is quite a complex report, but I'll pick out various elements and happy to take questions at the end. So obviously we've got the autumn statement, which is put us in the position that we are less worse off than we otherwise would have been. Being careful with my language, so I get told off saying that we're better off. But I'll come on to the detail of that later on in the report when we look at the overall figures. The next section talks about Ukraine. So I think this is the first update we've given you on Ukraine in terms of the financial position. So we've already approved a significant amount of the funding under the £10,500 per guest funding we've had from the government. This report seeks to approve two sets of new funding, so partly for the districts, for the work that they do on behalf of the refugees, but also for the County Council, a range of initiatives that we're looking to put in place. So your approval for those is being sought in this report. Moving on to section G, which is the business as usual financial monitoring. What we would normally do in this section is give you quite a breakdown of each individual department's position, but clearly the main issue for the moment is the inflationary pressures that we're facing. So what we've set out in this section is just what some of the key elements that we've put into the budget for this year, but also have had an impact in 23-24. Particularly like to draw your attention to the position in adult services. So you'll recall that for the current financial year, we added a significant amount, £35 million, to the budget as a result of increasing prices in the market, but also increasing growth in the number of clients that we have. And up until sort of September of this year, that was tracking pretty much in line with those estimates, albeit there were variances within the different areas. Pretty much since September, we have seen a marked increase in the number of clients that are coming through. Some of those with packages between £3,000 to £5,000 per week. And obviously you don't need many of those to start to add up to some big numbers. So we are seeing some particularly large increases in the current financial year, but then the full-year impact of those is even more significant. So we've built that into the budget, but that does represent an increase between £14 to £16 million for us for next year, which wasn't in any of the previous forecasts that we presented to you. Just moving down to H&I, which talks about the transformation to 2019-21 and the savings programmes 2023. Again, we've not given a significant amount of information in this update, but what we have been concentrating on within corporate management team is looking at those savings which are currently rated as being red. So obviously the delivery timescale for all of those programmes has been extended as a result of COVID. But what we are looking at the moment is whether or not there are any of those savings that are potentially going to be undeliverable, particularly in light of the market conditions that we are facing at the moment. So in particular, the two areas of concern are, again, adult services, but also home school transport, where you'll see later on in the report we have significant increases both in cost and the number of people receiving the service. Section J just outlines a number of the larger pressures that we are facing. So I think we've given you information on these before, but particularly within children's social workers, in order to be able to keep the number of cases per social worker at an acceptable level, we do need to invest more money to increase the capacity within our social work workforce. Homeschool transport, I've already mentioned. Again, that is a combination of increased activity, higher wage costs and inflation due to fuel, etc. And again, over the next 2 to 3 years, we expect that to be a significant increase on the forecast that we were previously predicting. Sorry, I forgot my mouse, so I'm having to scroll down. If I could just take you to paragraph 89, which is in some respects is an overall summary of the position that we are facing. So you'll recall in February when we set the budget, we were forecasting a deficit in 23-24 of around 48 million. You'll see there that the additions that we've made due to all of those pressures that I've already mentioned take us to a new gross budget gap of just short of £100 million. Obviously, the autumn statement has helped in terms of offsetting some of those increases in costs. So we've got business rates and the top-up grant that we get from the government. So that is linked to the inflation, and therefore we do expect to see quite a significant increase in the income from that source, although that will come from government in the form of grant, because obviously they've frozen business rates for businesses. We've got the reduction in services grant. We didn't really know much about this, so we were expecting all of that grant to disappear. And then social care grant within the autumn statement. There's significant additional funding was given nationally for that. Now, we're not expecting the provisional local government finance settlement until next week, but yesterday a policy paper was published by the government which gave us a little bit more information as to what to expect within the settlement. And from that we can see that the services grant, it will reduce slightly, but we don't expect to lose all of that. So hopefully we could see an additional 4 to 5 million as a result of that. And then similarly within the social care grant, although it's not as clear as I would like, they seem to indicate that they will distribute that on the same basis as they have in the past, which could mean that we're in the sort of upper end of the numbers that I'd quoted before. So we could look to see another £5 million additional on top of the 15 million quoted in that report. Obviously, they've increased the referendum limit to 5% for council tax. So if we set council tax at that level, that would be an extra 14.8 million. And due to the higher level of interest rates, we expect to make more money on investment interest next year, so an extra 10 million. So overall, taking all of that into account, effectively, we pretty much start off end up where we started, so a gap of around 50 million, which we can meet from the budget bridging reserve that we've already built up for that purpose. I think the only other comment to make is really just to demonstrate the scale of what we've been facing over the last year. So if I can take you to Appendix 2, which is on page, when I get there, page 53, which basically sets out the changes we've made since we set the cash limits in 22-23 to the position that we're setting for 23-24. You'll see there that we've restructured that into the new directorates, so it gives you some idea of the scale for each of those. But the important figure for me is if you look under inflation, growth and pressures, you'll see that between the 2 years we've added £154 million worth of spend just for 1 year. And when you consider for the last two lots of savings programmes, we've saved £80 million over 2 years twice, so 160 million over 4 years, and yet here we are adding nearly that sum in a single year in terms of the growth and pressures that we face. So I'll leave it there, Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Rob, thank you very, very much. And I would just like to say at this point, thank you to you and the team, and indeed the Chief Executive and all the corporate team, because I know the work that's gone into this and sort of the ground moving beneath us sometimes and having to react to announcements as well. So, and I know the Cabinet and I have spoken about this, to sort of thank you to all the work that you put into this and done that in these, what is well documented now, very, very difficult times for all of us. And I think it is interesting in terms of where the pressures are in adults and children, but indeed right across the whole authority in all areas, and the impact that that has on that and everybody, not only our residents, but obviously all the staff as well, and the pressures that puts upon us. So thank you for all the work you've done and explaining in detail. I'm going to go to Cabinet members for any questions. Has anybody got a question? Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. In terms of the pay award and the national living wage, clearly it's a great thing that it's been increased so that the people who are on the lowest levels have an increase in the wage that is equivalent or near to the inflationary pressures that we're currently under. But how does that translate then into your projections for 23, 24, and what does that look like for us? Is there additional pressure there?
Yeah, thanks. So at the moment we've got 3% built in for 23-24. The issue may well be if we end up with another flat rate, again that will be higher than that amount. But in the report, and I must admit this point had passed me by as well, we also need to be cognizant of what happens to the national living wage. So because there is always a delay in when we get the pay award, we need to take into account that whatever we are paying people in April 2024 needs to be at least at the level of the national living wage. And at the moment, there is due to be quite an increase expected for April 2024. So if that comes through, we'll obviously need to build that in to the position as well. So it could end up exceeding the 3%. And also, as the national living wage gets higher, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that it starts to wipe out spinal column points at the bottom end of the scale, and therefore puts pressure on the whole rest of the structure.
Nick, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Oppenheimer, Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. Rob, there's a large number of financial assumptions in the position presented for 23 to 24, and we appreciate you're making assumptions in the face of great uncertainty at the moment, but can I ask you, which of the assumptions are you most concerned about?
So I think two probably. There's the volatility, I think, particularly within adults. So whilst we've been tracking that throughout the year, and it remained, the trajectory remained consistent. So it's still an upward trajectory, but it was tracking against the assumptions that we had made. I think that position that we have now seen over the last couple of months worries me a bit, because if that trend continues at that level, then we will be looking at significant increases for next year. The other one was the one that I mentioned around the grant for social care, which we're assuming will be distributed on the same basis as last time. But what they did do last time was change the assumptions around council tax base. So they weighted it 80% towards adult social care formula and 20% away from those who have high tax bases, which clearly we do. So we lost quite a significant amount last time. My worry is that they do that further, and rather than go for 80-20, they go for 50-50, for example, which would have a significant impact on that number, which is why I prudently put in 15 and worrying about saying it could go up to 20, but that's our best sort of guess based on the policy statement that came out yesterday.
Thanks, Rob. It's very clear. Thank you. Any further questions? Steve. Councillor Foster, sorry.
Thank you, Leader. A couple of very brief comments with the Leader's permission, and then one question. The comments are, thank you, Mr. Carr, for the comment about the fact that we are less worse off than expected, and I think that's testament to the lobbying and the work done by both our members, the Leader, and officers throughout the period, so that's appreciated. Thank you. Also, some feedback on Section F, the Homes from Ukraine support. That was announced on the 24th, and feedback that I personally have received from some of our residents who are involved in this has been incredibly favourable. So again, thank you for that. My question is relating to the transformation programme to 2019. It's really encouraging to see that we can close off that transformation programme by the end of this year. But I wondered whether you had any comment on the likely outcome of the review of red-rated savings for the other programmes that is mentioned in the report.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think, as I said in my commentary, I think the two areas I'm most worried about is adult social care and homeschool transport. So there are significant savings both in T21 and SP23 relating to that. I think if you look at the market conditions we're in at the moment, with increasing numbers of clients, increasing price, very often some of the savings that we make in those areas is to do reviews or to undertake re-tendering exercises. Clearly, if we do either of those in the current environment, actually it's going to increase our costs, not reduce them. So I think my expectation is that there will inevitably be some fallout from that, which will obviously add to the pressure for next year. But the thing that I was keen to avoid was going into the medium-term position thinking that we're going to make those savings when clearly we're not. So I think it's important that we're as prudent as we are, as we possibly can be, and then in February we'll bring all of that together and make sure that we've got the best picture that we can give to you at that point.
That's great. Rob, thank you. Any further questions?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Rob, for a really thorough easy, not easy reading, but an easy to read paper. And you've done a very detailed explanation in paragraphs 54 to 59 around the inflationary costs relating to younger adult clients. But there's an increased number in those clients. Is that relating to COVID, or is it all tied up with that inflationary spiral as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think there is a direct link to the experiences over the last few years in terms of the pandemic, and we've got both a direct and an indirect causal link in terms of what we're seeing in younger adults. I would say I think there's probably 4 key drivers that we've seen. So we have seen an increasing number of younger adults with more complex needs and higher cost packages, and we traditionally have spoken about higher cost packages of £3,000 a week or more, and £3,000 was pre-COVID, that kind of benchmark in terms of the average cost. That over the course of this year, and particularly, as Mr. Carr has said, through the late summer and into the early autumn, has really started to increase quite significantly. So we're now seeing an average cost of £3,900 a week, and we've got more than 50 young people, and those are adults with learning disabilities, autism, and other complex support needs. So more than 50, almost £4,000 a week, and that is quite a significant increase. And as Mr. Carr has said, when you start taking that through to a full year impact, you start seeing some very large numbers start to come through. The second driver, I would say, or the cause, throughout the pandemic, and indeed, constantly, family carers do a phenomenal job to care for loved ones with complex needs. But because of the pandemic, where many services through necessity needed to pause, and particularly paused face-to-face support for individuals, family carers took more of that caring responsibility on. And we have seen an increased number of requests coming through from family carers to support children within their household, younger adults within their household. And that means that there's an increased cost there through the support being provided, including some of the respite support that we provide. I think the third cause is around we are seeing, and again it's a consequence, I think we can draw a very distinct line through lockdown restrictions of the pandemic. So more younger adults self-harming, and actually support needing to be provided to keep them safe. And then fourthly, some of the workforce pressures. We've said over a period of time, and indeed a few weeks ago at the Health and Adult Social Care Select Committee, there was an item around workforce pressures, both in social care and the NHS. We are seeing some very significant workforce pressures, both in terms of being able to recruit and retain staff, but then the cost of retaining staff because of attractions in the wider economy. And when we're talking about younger adults, we're frequently talking about individuals with very complex needs who will need 2-to-1 and on occasion 3-to-1 support. So inevitably, there's then a cost pressure that comes through. We are taking actions, so those are the drivers. We're doing a huge amount of work in terms of supporting those individuals, those families, hopefully to avoid a family breakdown and costs that could further increase. We are making respite and other support available. And we're also working very closely with our partners in the NHS in terms of the support systems that can be deployed and made available to individuals and their families.
Graham.
Thank you so much, Graham. Yeah,
So
no,
you've
that
got
was
a
just going to say,
follow-up,
and thank you for reassuring Hampshire residents that they are getting real value for money in this care service. Thank you.
Graham, I'd stay there just in case Rob might need you again. But thank you for that. Question for me, really, and further from any other members? No. Okay, thank you. We've seen the announcement that we had in the autumn statement, and I was going to say, do you think, but I ought to say, I suppose, do we think that the announcements in the autumn statement is enough to meet the increased needs in the social care costs that are in place at the moment? I think, as was suggested by the Secretary of State. I don't know whether Rob or Graham want to.
It's got money, so I'll do this one. So we had picked up on that comment by Michael Gove, that part of the reason for the lean towards social care funding in the autumn statement was to relieve the pressure on other budgets. I think you'll see from what we've presented in the report that isn't going to be the case. And I think once we get the provisional settlement and we're very clear on the additional funding that we've got for social care, I think that is perhaps the next letter that we should be writing to say, but these are the pressures that we face in social care, and this is the funding that we've received, even including the additional funding from the autumn statement. And I think we'll see that there's quite a big gap there.
Thanks for that. Thanks, Graham, as well. So, and I think it's really important to point that out, that it helps, but it clearly doesn't close the gap completely, and there's still enormous pressures on all of us from that point of view. I think it is also worth saying when we look at papers like this, just to remember also, we are one of the largest authorities and one of the most respected authorities in the country across all areas of the services that we do as well. So it is the expertise of the officer team, and I think working in partnership with members as well has got it to this point. And because as we know, there's pressures on lots of authorities, but as I understand, we're much better placed than most because of that. So I think, credit should go to the officer team as well, and that working relationship that we have, and the work that is done to get us to this point. So I'd just like to say that, put that on record for all of us. Do I have any further questions from any other members? Okay. So Rob, thank you very much, and I'll say, and for all the work you've done. And I will take us to the recommendations set out on pages 19 to 20. Can I take it everybody agreed with the recommendations as set out? Okay, agreed. That's great. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay, so we will now move on to agenda item 7, driving towards economic strength. And I think Chief Executive Carolyn's going to present the report. Carolyn, thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and Stuart Jarvis, Director of ETE, and Gary Westbrook, our Assistant Chief Executive, who's moving into the Director of 2050 role in January, will also join to cover, the three of us will cover any questions. But if I just kick off by presenting the report, it's your regular comprehensive report. It starts by providing an update on the national and global economic situation and also our Hampshire responses to the challenges that we are currently experiencing. In terms of the county deal, it gives you an update on the significant progress that has been made by central government regarding agreeing the county deal arrangements for those organisations that were selected. The ones that are going to go forward in wave 1, you can see clearly have made progress. There are a couple who have stalled primarily around a directly elected leader or not, as the case may be. We expect to hear early in the new year what the next steps will be around county deals from the government, and just to confirm that we stand ready to take forward the Pan Hampshire prospectus if given the opportunity to do so, and we've made that position very clear to government, and we remain hopeful that we'll get to take that forward early in the new year. The report also refers to 2 papers that you'll be considering later on in your agenda around our economic strategy and also our strategic asset management plan. Both of these reports are important building blocks for us for the future, and obviously in future reports it'll be a consolidated report that includes all of those items. You also have an update on the progress that we've been making around the growth and regeneration partnerships across Hampshire with our districts and boroughs, and also progress with LEP integration, albeit that is currently linked to progress with a county deal. And finally, as the leader highlighted at the outset of the meeting, the leadership restructure from January 2023 will ensure that we have a renewed focus on Hampshire 2050 vision and a drive towards economic strength for Hampshire. Colleagues, very happy between Stuart, Gary and myself to deal with any questions that you have. Thank you, Leader.
Carolyn, thank you very much. And another huge effort has gone into this report as well. Not only that, in terms of where we sit within our county deal proposals as well. I'm going to go to members first. Any members? Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you for that report, Carolyn, Chief Executive. Given the nature of the Hampshire economy and some of the international links as detailed in para 47 and a few others, and our strength, therefore, in exports, how important are international trade links to us?
Stuart, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Forster for the question. And the latest economic forecasts are predicting that the UK is going to be one of the slowest growing economies and probably have one of the longest recessions out of the G7. So in that context, international trade is particularly important to the UK. And international trade agreements remain a government priority. In that sense, I think the work that's been taking place in Hampshire in recent times is particularly important, and work that I know the leader has led on to foster international business partnerships and export links, particularly with India and South Africa. And interestingly, the most recent OECD Economic Outlook report suggests that the Indian economy will be the fastest growing world economy in 2023, with growth at about 5.7%, which is roughly 10 times as high as growth prediction for France and the USA. The South African economy is predicted to grow by about 1.1%, so less than that, but still significantly more than European and North American economies, whilst the British economy is predicted to contract, as will the German one, and they're the worst performing economies in the forecast, other than Russia, which is clearly significantly impacted by the war and international trade sanctions. So I think those links, particularly with India and South Africa, could prove to be very beneficial for Hampshire in the future.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And it is interesting in terms of the trade, something that we're looking at some of those other countries as well, and indeed have had meetings with the India Business Group locally and plan to have future meetings with them. Any further questions from any other members? Okay. So from me, really, I suppose, so since the last meeting in terms of our county deal being proposed and through the Wave 1 deal, there has been quite a lot of significant announcements in the progress in that Wave 1. And it's sort of trying to get a feel for where we are potentially, how we are lined up for looking at towards Wave 2. As I said, we've had lots of other announcements in Norfolk and Suffolk, and I've read some more this morning in terms of other counties that are looking at their proposals. So I'm just wondering, either Stuart or Gary, in terms of where we think we now are in terms of potentially going through looking at Wave 2.
Thank you. I'll take that one. Stuart, thank you, Leader. So I think we're in a very, very strong position. As colleagues are aware, we submitted a very strong latest prospectus both to the Secretary of State, the Levelling Up Minister, and also DLUC officials last month, with a really clear message that Carolyn intimated that we absolutely now stand ready to enter those negotiations. And that's built on a real foundation of really, really strong and effective partnership working, working collaboratively with a range of organisations to identify what those opportunities are across our wider strategic geography. That national picture over the last couple of months has been really interesting. So we've had 3 recent deals announced in the last 2 weeks in terms of Cornwall, Norfolk and Suffolk. And that's really demonstrating that devolution and county deals continue to be an absolute priority, both for the department but also the Secretary of State. And really seeing that connection between the much-needed economic growth, the skills and labour market shortages, which we've identified in a range of papers, as well as those wider enabling powers that devolution will give us in terms of that local autonomy and control. So, based on the original 9, Leader, that were announced in February, March time as part of the White Paper, over half of those have now got to a point of agreement with government, and we're now at the cusp of the next wave, apparently being ready to be announced early in the new year as those 5 now get completed. And based on all the reasons that I've articulated, I think we're in an excellent position, both in terms of the groundwork we've done, the engagement that we've done both with our MPs, central government and our local stakeholders, really to be knocking on the door of government in the new year to be in a strong position to start those negotiations.
Okay, Gareth, thank you very much. And it is an interesting point to mention about the amount of work that has gone on, I think, in the background, working with all our partners, including our MPs, and as Mr. Jarvis said, with our businesses as well. And I think we are well placed, and there does seem to be gaining a certain amount of momentum at the moment. So we just need to make sure we keep ourselves literally at the door, ready to go through to have those conversations when that opportunity arises. So I'm really pleased to see the report, the paper, and thank all the officer team as well for the amount of work that's gone into that. It's like a lot of these things, there's so much work that goes on in the background to get us to this point. It looks easy when we come to actually present the report, but I know the detail that goes sat in behind there. So thank you. I don't think I have any further questions from any Cabinet members. So I will take us, if that's okay, to the recommendations, and there's no further comments. No, okay. On pages set out, as they are set out in page 55 and 56, I accept the recommendations from Cabinet members. Okay, that's great. All agreed. Thank you all very much. Okay, we will now move on to agenda item 8, economic strategy. And I think Stuart Jarvis, you're going to present the report. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I'm very pleased to be bringing this report back to Cabinet today. Members may recall that Cabinet approved the draft economic strategy in July of this year and subsequently authorised us to go out and carry out a targeted consultation with key stakeholders, businesses and so on. This report basically presents the results of the consultation back to Cabinet and seeks your approval for the changes to the economic strategy in response to that consultation. The changes are relatively modest and there was a high degree of support for the strategy. I was particularly pleased that the Enterprise M3-LET, for example, endorsed the strategy at their board meeting. Yep. And generally there was a welcome for it. There was some detailed comments we received which basically we suggest that will need to be picked up in the action plan, and it's important that we translate a high-level strategy which sets a broad direction into detailed action plan which sets out interventions, and that we do that on an annual basis based on the resources the Council has available to us and whatever powers and provisions might be coming our way to take advantage of in the future through devolution or something like that. The report sets the information out fully. It's really important, I think, that we do translate that into an action plan, and I know that's something that my colleagues will be very keen to move forward in the economic development team, and those discussions are already underway with key partners around how that might work. And Chairman, there was one other comment I wish to make, and I must apologise to Cabinet because of a typo with this. I'm afraid we inadvertently failed to answer the climate change and carbon mitigation question this time round. What I can reassure Cabinet is the answer that was given in July when this paper was presented is the same, and it's basically to suggest that the tools employed by the County Council excuse me, to assess impacts on climate change adaptation and mitigation were utilised in this case, but they were found not to be applicable on the grounds that this decision relates to a strategic programme rather than detailed actions. The carbon adaptation and mitigation impacts will be looked at in detail when you go through the individual interventions, but members I'm sure will have noted that natural capital, for example, was one of the key components of this, and the economic strategy is very much around recognising the importance of the Hampshire environment, not only in its own right, but as an economic asset, and therefore I think members can be reassured that that remains at the heart of the economic strategy, which is very much about sustainable growth and a sustainable Hampshire which relishes and protects the natural environment, which has been very much part of its economic success. So with an apology for that omission, Leader, but hopefully you're reassured that nothing's changed since the last time you looked at the report.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Stuart. And yet again, thanks to the report. And I'm really pleased to see this and a continual update. And I know the reports will sort of merge into one another afterwards as we go forward in the 2050. Do any Cabinet members have any questions? Councillor Chad, Ros.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Stuart, for the report. Can I just ask, how important is devolution in delivering the economic strategy and securing Hampshire's long-term economic success?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a really good question, and I think it's fundamentally important. Meaningful devolution does involve granting Hampshire more freedom to make significant decisions about the area, but also providing more resources locally rather than those decisions being taken in Whitehall. The ability to reinvest in the proceeds of economic growth is fundamentally important to this area, but I would suggest it's also fundamentally important to the UK generally. The South East's a net contributor to the Treasury, and Hampshire's an important part of that South East economy that generates those benefits. And therefore, I think it's absolutely vitally important that granting greater devolution and autonomy to successful areas like Hampshire will help to generate the proceeds to enable levelling up investment to support those areas of the country with relatively poorer economic performance. But also, I think it's important to remember that we're in a competitive international global environment, and that the competitiveness of the South East is one of the reasons that economies like Hampshire have been successful. Devolution is essential to maintain that competitiveness, both by giving us the ability to invest in things like skills and infrastructure to ensure that Hampshire and the other parts of the South East remain internationally competitive and a good place for international businesses to locate and bring their investment and employment to our area. If that investment isn't maintained, for example, in the transport infrastructure, then the congested area will gradually lose its competitive advantage and our economic performance will slip, which would be to the detriment of the whole of the UK rather than just to Hampshire's economy. So I think it's very important that devolution is secured. I'm kind of reassured, and I think my colleague Gary Westbrook outlined really that the prospects for those conversations starting are looking better than they have for some time. I think the key thing that I would say is it must be meaningful devolution.
Okay, Stuart, thank you very much. And interesting to hear that in terms of what the devolution, the impact that it does have on Hampshire and wider, of course. Don't go away, Stuart. You're running off anyway, just yet. I haven't got no further question. I was just making sure you weren't going to run off. I don't have any further questions. I don't know if anybody else does, but like that. Okay. So I will take us to, if that's okay, the recommendations as set out on page 121. All Cabinet agreed? Okay, agreed. So we'll take that as accepted. Thank you very much. But what I would just like to say, Stuart, I think this is your last formal Cabinet meeting that you will be attending. So I just wanted to say from me, personally, thank you for all the help and support that you have given me over many, many years. And those conversations we had sort of from at close of plays, anywhere from 5 o'clock to 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, chewing things over about, about where we are in terms of, certainly in terms of economy, transport and environment, when that was my role. So thank you for that. But also thank you from all members and all the officer team as well for the work that you have done over many, many years to supporting Hampshire, Hampshire's economy and the residents of Hampshire. I know I've spoken to many of our MPs recently that were very sad to hear that you're retiring, that you'll be a great loss. And the Chief Executive and I were at the County Council's Network meeting where many people from across the country, I don't think people realise this, that the respect that you've had from your colleagues right across the country and the work that you've done. So from all of us, Stuart, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. Would you like to say a few words? You don't have to, but you do now.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to kind of hold the role that I do. I love Hampshire, and it's very much become an adopted home to me and my family. We've probably got about 395 years to go to catch your family connections up with Hampshire. But one of the things that makes this place so special is the ambition that the people, particularly at the County Council, have for Hampshire. I've worked in lots of different parts of the country, and whilst everybody's always passionate about their area, you know, whether that's the Black Country or Pembrokeshire, Somerset, Southampton, the difference in Hampshire, I think, is that people are not only passionate about Hampshire, but they're also ambitious for it. and the level of ambition and desire to do the best possible thing for the area is kind of what makes Hampshire County Council second to none in my experience, and it's kind of what made me stay here. I'm absolutely delighted that I leave at a time that economic development is at the heart of the political agenda, and that recognition that whilst it's always going to be vital for us to look after the most vulnerable in society, and that's a critical role, you can't do that if your economy doesn't work to generate the proceeds to do that. And I'm absolutely delighted to be able to, in my final cabinet meeting, to be presenting an economic strategy that I think will see the county through. And also just generally, I'd like to say thank you to the members because I've worked with you for a long time, particularly to you, Rob, because we worked together for so long in ETE. But to all members, I have been absolutely so deeply heartened and kind of grateful for the respect, the friendliness and the engagement that has always been there for members across the political divide in Hampshire in my time here. And I think it's that respectful engagement and enthusiasm that drives this organisation to the levels of performance that it consistently achieves despite the best efforts of the Treasury to hold us back.
That's very good of you to say, Stuart. And once again, thank you very, very much for everything you've done for all of Hampshire, including the residents, and as I say, and further afield. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, you're off the hook now, Stuart. You can retire. No further questions. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will move on now to agenda item 9, Strategic Asset Management Plan. And I think Rebecca and Tim are going to present the paper. Rebecca, Tim, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Just before I take you through the report, I'm joined this morning by Tim Martinson, who has been instrumental in the development of the new Strategic Asset Management Plan that we're bringing forward for approval today. And he and I will obviously be happy to answer any questions you may have when we've taken you through the report. So the report this morning brings forward for your approval a new 5-year strategic asset management plan for the County Council's estate. And the new strategic asset management plan itself is provided as Appendix 1 of the report, while the report provides you with the context for the development of the plan and highlights some of the key drivers for change, key themes and priority activities for implementation of the new plan. The role of a strategic asset management plan, or SAMP as we tend to call it, is to provide a strategic framework for the management of the County Council's estate so that we can ensure that our land and assets contribute to delivering the corporate priorities and objectives. And this particularly includes enabling and contributing to the economic regeneration and growth that we've just been talking about, that Stuart has presented, placemaking in Hampshire, as well as facilitating and responding to the ongoing transformation of our County Council services whilst we seek to reduce the operational costs of our estate. Within the context section of the report at paragraph 7 to 11, we've highlighted what members will be aware of in terms of the scale and diversity of the County Council's estate, which is significant both in terms of the number and variety of assets that we own and occupy, the different operational uses that they're put to, as well as the financial value of all the operational and transactional activity that occurs across the estate and in support of the management of the estate. And some statistics are provided at paragraph 9 that illustrate that scale. Within the context of the sort of current economic uncertainty, ongoing changes in ways of working, and also the financial pressures that we've heard about already this morning, The new strategic asset management plan has intentionally been written as a strategic framework for the management of the estate rather than a very detailed, specific plan. And it providing guiding principles that we can then apply to the development of specific asset strategies and allow us to respond to that change. It is the third iteration of a strategic asset management plan for the County Council, and the report highlights at paragraphs 12 to 14 some of the significant programmes of work that we have delivered under the previous strategic asset management plan, and also highlights some of the sort of broader themes that continue into this latest plan. The plan itself is structured in 4 parts. So there's a high-level vision, which talks to what we want as the future for the County Council's estate, some key principles that will inform how we make decisions in relation to our assets, some strategic objectives, identifying some of the key aims over the 5-year period of the plan, and then a very high-level action plan about the steps that we will take to realise that vision. And the report sets out some of the drivers for change and some of the key themes that we're looking to respond to through the plan, and again, just to highlight particularly contributing to that economic growth and regeneration and shaping the place of Hampshire in line with Hampshire 2050, reshaping our operational estate, but also changes to the way that we operate organisationally in our management of our assets and decision making around our assets, to ensure that we're joined up, have a corporate approach and an evidenced approach to how we further change and invest in the estate. And those priorities will drive the key actions that we'll take in implementing the SAMP, which will be developed through the new Hampshire 2050 Directorate. So really, in conclusion, the Strategic Asset Management Plan that we're bringing forward today for your approval, it provides that clear strategic framework for how we manage our assets and will ensure that we continue to use our land and our assets in the best possible way to contribute to both Hampshire as a place and the County Council's objectives for delivery of its own services and meeting its financial targets. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Rebecca, thank you very much. And I'll just make a comment at first in terms of really, really pleased to see this and how appropriate it is at the timing when we start looking at all our other situation with the budgets. But one thing you said there reminded me in terms of, you said about respond to change. And I think it's really important now how agile we can be and look for those opportunities to take, and having the plan in place allows us to do that. So I'm really pleased to see this. Questions from members. Councillor Chad, Ros.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the report. The County Council clearly has a substantial estate, and paragraph 9 of the report identifies this, and it identifies the total value of the County Council's land and building assets at £3.5 billion. Can you say how much of the estate is operational assets, such as schools, and which have limited market value, compared to the surplus and assets with commercial or developmental potential, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. As you said, the vast majority of our estate is operational. We've got 566 school sites, for example. We've also got a large number of library sites, care homes, etc. So the vast majority of our estate is used for operational purposes. But about 3% of our estate is either identified as surplus or vacant, and at the moment we go through the process of identifying whether it should be repurposed, reused for something else, or whether it's suitable for disposal. So there's an opportunity there. In addition to that, we also have quite a large sort of strategic land development portfolio, which we're bringing forward across the county, generally for residential development, which helps support the wider economy. And also, I think we have to bear in mind that a lot of our assets are, when we look at that 3.5 billion, they're based on direct replacement value, such as a school, rather than its commercial value. So we look at that 3% as the commercial value and opportunity. But there are potentially other opportunities as we go through over the next 5 years, linking to the economic development plan, that we can explore further.
That's very good. Thank you very much. And a good question, pretty relevant at the moment. Councillor Oppenheimer, you have a question. Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say I really welcome the strategy's focus on commerciality and particularly, as you say, Tim, bringing in expertise to test assumptions. I'm just looking at paragraph 9, and I just wanted to ask a question about the rental income. So I see we've got 5.3 million rental income at the moment. Can you give us any more of a sense of how far up we can get that and how soon? And I don't necessarily expect you to put a figure on it, but can you just give us some indication of what you are hoping to achieve through this strategy?
Thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. Yes, you're right that the rental income identified in paragraph 9 of the report is largely income that we obtain through leasing of current, mostly operational assets to third parties, partners across the estate. And that includes things like preschools and nurseries that are leased arrangements on our school sites, as well as things like our county farms tenants and other arrangements that we have on the site. Currently, our portfolio of commercial assets is quite small. We have land holding interest at Sedgensworth Industrial Estate, where we have various arrangements, including some warehousing. But what we're hoping to do under the new Strategic Asset Management Plan is look more broadly at what commercial opportunities there are with assets, both in terms of where there might be an opportunity to support commercial development that supports economic growth and activity, employment and skills, and also where there may be opportunities to layer additional commercial options onto land that we hold or assets that we hold for existing purposes to generate additional income that will be of value to the organisation, as well as the sort of further rationalisation that will potentially create some capital receipt positions. So I think it's a balance of opportunity and risk that we're looking to take, but that's certainly one of the areas that we're going to be looking at as a matter of priority to see how quickly we can identify opportunities across the estate to draw in more financial benefit and hopefully other opportunities to stimulate growth as well.
Rebecca, thank you. That's really good. Councillor Warwick, I think you have a question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Rebecca. I know we all support this strategy, and I think it's a really well put together paper. In Appendix 1, it talks about disposal of assets, and I know the county has some land holdings which occasionally you put in local district, local plans. This is more of a plea than a question, but could you please notify local members and communities when you are putting land forward for disposal? Because I think sometimes we're on the back foot. We don't always know what the thinking is or whether it's a county asset. We're not too sure of the land holding. And I just wonder if that would be possible for you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Absolutely. And part of the work that we'll be doing through the new Hampshire 2050 Directorate is making sure that we bring all of that intelligence together, join it up with all of the other activity that we may be doing within different parts of the county and make sure that we have that early visibility for members as well as for Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And I think that is an important question in terms of the last sort of 3 agenda items will eventually come together as one report. And that's what this allows that to do, that very thing. So I think that does join up the dots, as you've heard me say once or twice before. Any further questions from members? No, okay. Rebecca and Tim, just to say thank you very much. And you said again, Rebecca, about quickly identifying, and I think that's what it does, those opportunities. That's why it's good to bring those 3 reports together, but to have this as well, enabling us to react quickly and know exactly where we are and those opportunities, commercially talking to our colleagues and partners as well is really good. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to take us to the recommendations that's set out on page 111. Cabinet all happy to accept the recommendations as set out? Okay, as set out. Thank you both very much. Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to agenda item 10, the annual safeguarding report, Children's Services. And Stuart Ashley is going to present the report, as I incorrectly called you the other way round last time, Mr. Ashley.
You did, Leader.
Apologies. Got it right this time.
I answer to anything.
Thank you. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, members. This is the annual safeguarding report for Children's Services. It's quite a lengthy report because it covers all of the safeguarding activity that goes on within the department. It's structured into national developments, local performance and activity, local developments and future priorities. And given some of what we've heard about finances, clearly children's social care is in the spotlight. I'll highlight briefly three key points if I can. Firstly, at page 128, the independent review of children's social care. It's an important review for us because it's suggesting we can deliver children's social care, like many getting over the cold. We can deliver it very differently and potentially much more efficiently. However, the report also says the sector needs £2.6 billion investment. The Department for Education has been very positive in saying it wants to introduce the reforms, but it's remained silent so far on the money. So we wait to hear on that point. Secondly, on page 131, what members you can see is a sustained increase in demand for children's social care. Over the last 2 years, we've seen 30% increase in demand for children's social care services. Despite that, as that section also evidences, performance has remained really quite incredibly strong, amongst the strongest regionally and indeed nationally, a testament, I think, to your workforce in children's services. And then finally, I would just draw your attention to page 135 of the report. Again, a key national issue, the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children coming over on the small boats, as members will be very aware. The government has recently increased the numbers that local authorities now are mandated to take. Previously, we were under an instruction to receive 195 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. They've now raised that to 285. Grant funding from the government for asylum-seeking children is, when they are children, so under 18, is broadly cost neutral. It covers the costs of their placement because they become looked after by us as a local authority. However, when they reach the age of 18, the funding is significantly short. About 25% of our care leavers are now former unaccompanied asylum seekers, and that's costing the local authority £1.2 million because that's a deficit in grant funding that we receive from the government. That number and that cost is only going to rise, given that the average age of arrival is 17, so children quickly switch over into the adult's domain and become care leavers, hence the increased costs. Leader, those are the key points I wanted to highlight.
Stuart, thank you very much. And I think it does clearly demonstrate the pressures and increased demand on the system, but you're quite right also to point out about the service that has been delivered within those, with those existing pressures and continuing pressures and growth in demand. And yet again, as I said earlier, about the services that we deliver recognised nationally about in terms of the excellent quality that's done. And I know a members' briefing yesterday clearly demonstrated some of the areas that, that we're involved with and what we do and what we deliver. I'm going to go to members. Councillor Heron, Edward.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned the shortfall in funding for former unaccompanied asylum-seeking children leaving care and the large gap there. Is that a national issue or across all local authorities, or is there something particular about Hampshire being impacted in this way?
An interesting question. Unfortunately, Hampshire is impacted upon more than many local authorities. We've always received what we call spontaneous arrivals, so children getting off the back of lorries on the A34 or on the M3 services, and then we've begun to look after those children and take responsibility for them. Obviously, they are now 18 years old. Many other local authorities don't have spontaneous arrivals. For example, the Isle of Wight doesn't have spontaneous arrivals. And so we've been more adversely impacted in that sense. And now with the National Transfer Scheme, before that wasn't mandatory, it is now mandatory, but Hampshire's been receiving arrivals all along. So unfortunately, our burden in terms of care leavers is greater than many other authorities.
Just for my understanding, with the National Transfer Scheme, in working out the allocation, does that take into account the number of spontaneous arrivals we might have had?
It does. The target figure, yes, it does. It does include spontaneous arrivals, but they're paid at a lower rate. And I have no idea why.
All right, thank you. Further questions? Councillor Foster, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and some of the other issues, but if I were to just ask you to please summarise what the main drivers behind the increase in demand for children's social care services are. Would you be able to put that fairly succinctly for us?
I'll do my very best because it's a complex issue, I think. A number of factors, significant increases in children experiencing mental health issues, partly brought on by the pandemic, a significant increase in adults experiencing mental health issues, which there clearly then impacts on their children. We've seen a significant rise in domestic abuse, particularly since 2020 and the onset of the pandemic. And put all of that together with an increased awareness from the professional network about the impact those things have on children, that's led, I think, to the increase in demand.
Chairman, if I may come back, really appreciate that, and I think that reiterates how important it is to be aware of these and some of the publicity that the county has done recently on looking for signs of abuse, neglect, etc. Puts it into perspective and makes sure that we all have a duty to watch out for this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Oppenheimer, Russell, you had a question as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Stuart, County Lines is mentioned under child exploitation. I know this has caused huge concern in communities, this issue, not just because of the damage caused by the exploitation of children, but also because of the proliferation of drugs that causes further damage in the community. I know there's been a big multi-agency effort over the last few years to disrupt the County Lines gangs. Can I ask, where do you see that we are with that ongoing effort? We'd welcome your update.
Thank you for the question. I think Hampshire's in a strong position. We know that these gangs operate out of cities, and County Lines basically is them attempting to expand their business base, in short. We have a pan-Hampshire strategy, a multi-agency strategy, that's then translated down operationally. So within each district in Hampshire, there is, on a 4-weekly basis, a multi-agency meeting that reviews and tracks and intervenes with a number of children. Those children who intelligence tells us are potentially at risk through County Lines. We've had some very, very significantly positive disruption activity in various parts of the county. We have a dedicated children's services multi-agency team. We lead around exploitation. It's won 3 national awards in terms of the creativeness of its interventions and how effective it's been. The police have a dedicated missing, exploited and traffic team, and we work hand in glove with them. In short, I'd say we're in a good position, but we have to remain vigilant.
Stuart, thank you very much, and please take back to the entire team. I know a lot of the work you do is unseen and not realise what goes on, but we're aware clearly as members of your team as well. So, and I say that in the context of the pressures and the increased demand you're getting and things that get thrown at us from time to time and to cope with. So thank you to you and the team as well, but thank you very much. So I'm going to take us to the recommendations as set out on page 127. Cabinet happy to accept the recommendations. Okay, all agreed and accepted. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stuart. Okay. Right, going to move on to agenda item 11, Annual Safeguarding Report, Adults, Health and Care. Graham Allen is going to present the report. Graham, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And following on from the Children's Services Safeguarding Update Report, this report and indeed 2 subsequent reports that I'll be presenting this morning are annual reports which hopefully will provide Cabinet with assurance in terms of the work being undertaken across a range of services and partnerships in terms of keeping our communities and our residents safe. So, as I've said, this is an annual update on adult safeguarding, and it's one of a suite of assurance and governance papers before you this morning. The report outlines work ongoing within adults' health and care on safeguarding improvement, as well as oversight of the multi-agency coordination that goes on to keep people safe across the wider system through the Hampshire Safeguarding Adults Board. All of this work is under statutory requirement held by Hampshire County Council under the Care Act 2014. You'll see within the body of the report a range of work that's been undertaken through the course of the last year. So this is a backward-looking report to the 21-22 financial year, but all of that work continues apace within this year. We have seen increased demand and indeed complexity of referrals coming through, and to some degree it picks up some of the comments I made in response to Councillor Warwick's question around demand pressures within younger adults. We are seeing across our communities increased demand and complexity, and that is borne out in our safeguarding work. Very positively, we've conducted safeguarding adult reviews, again statutory requirement where referrals meet those thresholds, and that's provided significant learning not only to us but all of our partners working across Hampshire. We've also brought forward some new service improvements in terms of the enhanced support service, and we are seeing increases particularly in forms of self-neglect. Again, I would point to the pandemic and people being isolated. So we are seeing self-neglect referrals increasing, and also cases giving rise to concern where people are hoarding within their own homes, and that creates specific safeguarding risks. We are working to introduce in due course the liberty protection safeguards. They will replace the deprivation of liberty safeguards which we currently work to. They've been delayed a number of times, mostly as a consequence of the pandemic, but they will bring about some changes in terms of practice and requirements as we go forward. I would, within the body of the report, point you to the link to the Hampshire Safeguarding Adults Board. There is much good information within that, and indeed the business plan of that board, and it absolutely reflects across the collaboration which is the Hampshire Safeguarding Partnership, that growth in the number of safeguarding referrals and indeed the number of safeguarding adult reviews that have been undertaken. There's been some really excellent work undertaken. I would particularly point to the new fire safety framework, which has been developed and led by colleagues within Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue, adopted by all system partners, which is about increasing awareness for all staff and all residents around risks of fire and how those risks can be mitigated, and particularly supporting great work that Hampshire Fire and Rescue do in terms of their safe and well visits, which are available free of charge to Hampshire's residents. The board has also launched an app through this year, the See It to Stop It app, where residents concerned about the safety and welfare of other individuals can make referrals. And really positively, during Safeguarding Week, which is a national annual event held in, I think, the second week of November, here in Hampshire, we saw almost 38,000 social media hits in terms of that See It to Stop It app, in terms of people taking a look and hopefully making it available on their smart devices. Chairman, I'll stop there, but more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Members' questions. Councillor Heron.
Thank you. The report, sort of paragraph 16 to 18 and the helpful table at 18 sort of highlights the positive work that we've done on the improvement to increasing the number of safeguarding concern referrals and inquiries. Couple of questions. The first is sort of that bit of work. How does that improved position in Hampshire compare with our statistical neighbours? And equally, can you just give a little information on are there any main themes that we're coming through in those referrals? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So firstly, in terms of comparison to similar local authorities, probably our two most obvious similar authorities would be Essex and Kent, both in terms of size, but also their demographic and indeed their geography. So when we compare Hampshire to both Kent and Essex, we're all in a line in terms of what we're seeing in terms of that volume of referrals coming through. And that's really important to understand, because We were previously seeing a lower or a smaller number of referrals coming through. So that improvement work has absolutely brought us up to what we would say is a comparator number of equal volume. And that's just important to make sure that we're seeing everything that we need to see across our communities. In terms of themes, I would say there are primarily three key themes that we're seeing. The first is something called an act of omission. So that's a failure to do something. So we tend to see referrals around acts of omission in care settings. And that can range from a failure to respond to somebody asking for some support, through to failures to provide people with drinks on a regular basis, and making sure that they're safe and well. And that, as I say, typically is in care environments. So that's the first theme that comes through. The second theme, and I've mentioned it already, is around self-neglect. So people, for a whole variety of reasons, that are isolated, not in touch with the local community, which gives rise to concern. So we are now very positively seeing more referrals coming through in those situations. And then the third theme, sadly, is where we see a risk of physical abuse and physical violence. And to that end, we are doing a huge amount of work, again, with all partners. I think the thing that I would point out is referred to in the report is some of the work that we're doing through the Domestic Abuse Partnership. Now, clearly, where somebody has got care and support needs, their ability to seek support and to be kept safe is somewhat compromised, frequently because of a disability. So we're very, very positively working into that area. So those are the three main themes.
Graham, thank you very much. Further questions from other Councillor Chad? Ros?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Graham, for the report. In the report, and you mentioned actually in your presentation as well, the update on our preparations for the anticipated introduction of the liberty protection safeguards. Can you please expand on these and what these changes will mean for Hampshire residents, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. And there is an element of technicality which I'll try to avoid, but I think some of the key features between the prevailing deprivation of liberty safeguards and the new liberty protection safeguards is really important. So I'm really grateful for the question. So we've had over a number of years now, it's probably the best part of a decade, the deprivation of liberty protection safeguards. And they operate in particular care environments, and that might be a hospital setting or a care home setting where an individual lacks capacity to make key decisions. And in particular, assessments are undertaken which provides an assurance and a framework by which appropriate legal decisions can be taken in the best interests of that individual. And that might, for example, be a decision to prevent them being able to leave the care environment because they would be at risk from traffic and so on and so forth should they leave. The new liberty protection safeguards will mean that anyone above the age of 16 in any environment, whether it's a care environment or a domestic setting, will have to have similar considerations taken. At the moment, DOLs operate in care environments, hospitals, care homes, and so on. The liberty protection safeguards will extend that framework to all settings where individuals may lack capacity from the age of 16 up. Now, what it also does is it brings a degree of increased responsibility upon us, but also partners, in terms of the frameworks that can be put in place. So at the moment, in some cases, we may need to go to the Court of Protection in order to get those permissions under the deprivation of liberty safeguards. In due course, the administration for that framework, less so with the Court of Protection, more so with ourselves as a local authority, but also with NHS partners. So it will be a significant change. Positively, there will be an increased role for approved mental health professionals in terms of those determinations. So it gives us greater freedoms, but also greater responsibilities to keep people safe under that new framework.
A really good question. So in terms of that, Graham, I suppose it's additional, as you say, additional responsibilities, but it is welcomed overall because of the process. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Warwick, Jan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And on the theme of self-neglect, Graham, there's a paragraph 21 that talks about a pilot study that I think we initiated or took part in on the enhanced support worker whose expertise is to go into homes that otherwise the door would remain firmly shut. And I just wondered, is it too early to know the outcomes and if that new enhanced support worker is working better? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And again, really great question. And what I would say is, and it builds upon some of the comments I made in terms of presentation of the report, there is a huge amount of system and partnership learning that we've undertaken over a number of years through Safeguarding Adult Reviews, and the enhanced support workers is part and parcel of that learning. It's not too early, although it is very early in terms of the development of that new role for us. So we've been accepting referrals since October of this year, and we've had around about 40 individuals referred into that service this year. Really positively, we have been able through that new service to intervene and really head off the risk of catastrophic incident or failure for those individuals being referred. And typically the kinds of things that are coming through are risk of fire, largely through self-neglect, but not only, largely as a consequence of cluttering and hoarding that people experience. And we are working very positively with all system partners. So actually the enhanced support worker service is linking very closely with colleagues in primary care, so GPs, working with housing providers, working with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue. And we are thinking already, although early, is driving some really positive change for those individuals and the support that they're able to receive. So I'll be delighted in 12 months' time to give a further update in terms of how that programme of work is progressing. Thank you.
Any further questions, member? Steve, Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief one. In terms of doing those assessments, you mentioned additional mental health professionals. Do we have, or are there enough mental health professionals in the system, or is that an area that is going to be focused on expanding?
So we do have, at the moment, a workforce that we deploy under the Deprivation of Liberty Safeguards, their best interest assessors. So not only, but typically qualified social workers. We've also, as part of general development across our services, brought forward a role of senior social worker. And those senior social workers need to come with added skill and development opportunity. And some of that will be absolutely in this direction in terms of being appropriately trained and qualified in order to undertake those assessments. So we've been looking at this for a period of time. There has been delay. We've used that period of delay well in order to prepare once liberty protection safeguards come in, and we've got that workforce that absolutely will be tilting in that direction appropriately.
Any further questions from members? Graham, I just wanted to say it's another report, like I was saying to Stuart, in terms of so much work goes on that goes unseen, but the impact that it has on the people that's all there is obviously hugely significant. Also interested here about the work we're doing with the Fire Authority, joining up the dots, I'm afraid I have to say that again, and working with our partners, which is the way you only achieve overall, is by working with partners. So thank you very much for that. No further questions. I will take us to the recommendations as set out on page 145. All agreed to accept the recommendations? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Graham. I think you're staying in the chair, Graham, I think, for the next two, aren't you? So we'll move to agenda item 12, Hampshire Community Safety Strategy Group. Over to you again, Graham. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. So as I said earlier, this is one of three reports. The second of three reports I'm presenting this morning in terms of hopefully assurance for Cabinet as we go forward. So again, it's an annual report. I think this is probably the third time that I presented this report now to Cabinet at this time of year. So the Hampshire Community Safety Strategy Group meets on a regular basis, quarterly, and this report provides an annual update on the work that we as a local authority undertake through statutory requirements that we hold as the upper tier local authority. It is a report which hopefully provides assurance to you and oversight in the ways in which we, Hampshire County Council, work with a broad collaboration of key partners to operate to make places and our communities safer. The report identifies the priority areas overseen by the group and an update on key progress over the last 12 months. It's important to recognise that such positive progress continues through a network of partner and Hampshire County Council-led work, ranging from our collective activities to reduce exploitation and violence, through, for example, the disruption of organised crime by Hampshire Constabulary, the involvement of our dedicated Willow team, particularly around county lines, so picking up on an earlier question. Also reducing violence and intimidation against women and girls, combating hate-based violence and extremism, which is an issue that I'll be further covering in the Prevent report in due course, and also our activities to promote and support community cohesion and resilience. I think it's really important to point out that priorities within the group, and it is an officer group across partner agencies, covers 3 areas of risk and vulnerability and harm, but that 4th one, resilience and cohesion within our communities, is vitally important because Hampshire remains a really, really great place to live. So whilst the report provides commentary about each of those priority areas, I'm pleased to commend the report to you. I would also say that we recently attended the P&R Select Committee and gave an update in terms of the actions and the work that we've undertaken this year, and indeed colleagues provided presentations on restorative justice, which is a key plank in the ways in which organisations work to achieve community safety across Hampshire. Chairman, I'll stop there, but happy to take any questions.
Graham, thank you very much. Questions from members? Councillor Fairhurst, Liz.
Thank you, Leader. I'm sure members are all aware that it's been White Ribbon Fortnight, which is a campaign against domestic abuse for women, which always spikes during football tournaments. So can I just say, also I won't be popular, I'm really pleased England's out of the football tournament. Having visited a women's refuge recently. But going back to the harm that's caused by the drug trade, the levels of violence, how are we developing partnerships to cope with this in Hampshire?
Yeah, thank you. Really, really key question for us. So it's important for me to say that the Community Safety Strategy Group is not so much a doing group, it's a supportive and assuring body that comes together. So there are huge numbers of networks of partnerships that are already operating across our county. And what we've got in terms of drug misuse is implementation of a 10-year government strategy, and that's progressing really, really positively. So Hampshire County Council, along with partners, are part and parcel of the Combating Drugs Partnership, and the Director of Public Health is the designated accountable officer for that work. There are 3 key priority areas of the strategy. First one, breaking the supply of drugs, and my colleague Stuart Ashley gave some update with regard to county lines earlier. Secondly, delivering a world-class substance misuse treatment and recovery system, and we've got some real innovation locally here in Hampshire. And then thirdly, reducing the demand for recreational drugs. And in support of our delivery, the County Council has received and will be investing over a 3-year period some £800,000 to secure improvements to the quality and accessibility of treatment services. And that is making sure that we're reaching out into all our communities, particularly where there may be issues of homelessness, but also in terms of the comments that you made, working with key partners around domestic abuse and other forms of intervention through, for example, our partnership with the National Probation Service, Hampshire Constabulary and others.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Graham. Any further questions? Councillor Nick Adams-King.
I'll ask a quick one if I may. The second priority around the issues that Liz was just highlighting, I'm sad that they're out of the football, but I'm glad they won the cricket. And but the work that we're doing in schools to highlight domestic, violence against women, how is that going in terms of how the schools are engaging and how they're addressing that priority?
Yeah, thank you. Really, really key issue for us. And what I would say, firstly, is that our schools across Hampshire are engaging exceptionally well. So really, really, really positively. And the schools themselves see this as a vitally important issue. So behind that exceptional engagement, there are now some statutory responsibilities for all state schools to implement relationship, sexual education and health education. And this violence against women and girls is a key part of that agenda, hence that exceptional support that we're seeing. And we are working through colleagues in Children's Services very closely with our schools in developing both a universal but also bespoke offer in terms of what they might need to be additionally supported with. So there's training for staff, there's training and support for governors. We're preparing toolkits for preventing and dealing with incidents of prejudicial language and behaviour. So everything that hopefully schools will need in order to deliver this key part of their curriculum is available for them. One of the comments I would make is we are wanting to do further work with the post-16 providers because there isn't yet a statutory requirement for them to engage in this agenda in the way that it is for other schools. So it's something that will continue to develop, I'm sure, but the engagement has been extremely positive.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Steve, Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Chair. One brief one, if I may. Certainly locally within Basingstoke and Dean and Hart, we've seen increases in antisocial behaviour. We've seen gang issues, etc. Where does antisocial behaviour fit with the strategic priorities for the group?
Yeah, thank you. And certainly I'm very aware that one of the things for members will be reported antisocial behaviour, and it's not only incidents of antisocial behaviour, it's the fear of antisocial behaviour which will quite rightly concern residents. So within the Community Safety Partnership, there are responsibilities that sit with more local partnerships, so particularly at district and borough level, which will be the crime and disorder partnerships. And across Hampshire, there's a really, really positive network led by district and borough council partners in terms of those antisocial behaviour, crime and disorder work that takes place. They get reported up to the county-wide group, and indeed where we're able to lean in collectively, learning from what worked well in one area that could actually be imported and used somewhere else, also using that intelligence, because some of that antisocial behaviour, it may present as antisocial behaviour, but there may be something else driving it in the background. For example, county lines. So it's an opportunity both to learn from, aggregate up, and then cascade back down. So we use the group as a forum to collect that kind of intelligence, but the engine room will be in those more localised groups within districts and boroughs.
Thanks, Graham. Any further questions? Okay, thanks again, Graham, and thanks for highlighting the work that goes on within the group. Much appreciated, thank you. I have no further questions, as I say, so I take us to the recommendations as set out on page 159. All happy to accept? Great, thank you very much. Okay, last agenda item, the annual Prevent report, and Graham, it's over to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, members. You will be pleased. This is the last report I'm presenting. It's the end of your agenda. I will be brief. So again, in common with both the Adult Safeguarding and the Community Safety Strategy report, this Prevent report is an annual update. It's an interesting report in many regards. Most of the information within the Prevent agenda is considered official sensitive, so in many ways this is a report that tells you very little. I apologise for that, but in advance of today's report being presented, I've briefed both the leader and the deputy leader in terms of some of the information, some of the statistics that go behind this. So the annual report covers the local authorities' Prevent duties, including the County Council's channel panel responsibilities, and we as a local authority are charged with the responsibility of operating in what's known as the pre-criminal space. Clearly where actions are required of the police, they are the lead. We seek to work at an earlier stage to intervene and hopefully divert people away from behaviours that give cause for concern. The context, though, remains one where global events, terrorist risks abroad and also at home, and a growth in hate crime and online radicalisation are driving an increased number of referrals and the actions that we're needing to take. And we are seeing that in terms of sustained growth in the number of referrals being received by the Channel Panel. I'm pleased to say that the County Council has been judged very positively in terms of our submission on an annual basis by the Office for Homeland Security. So each year we're audited and need to provide assurance to the Office for Homeland Security. We're seen as meeting all requirements and indeed exceeding many expectations in terms of the work that we do here in Hampshire, both on Prevent and also Channel. And this, I hope you'll agree, is a positive endorsement of the work taking place across a number of services here in Hampshire. We have seen some events in Hampshire over the course of this year, including protests both at Farnborough Airport and also on our refinery sites earlier this year. Chairman, I'll stop there, but more than happy to take any questions.
Okay, Graham, thank you. And yes, Councillor Chad and I did have a full briefing and understand the comments you made about sensitivity within the reports as well. Members' questions. Councillor Fairhurst, Liz.
Thank you. Graham, is the current picture in Hampshire reflective of the national picture?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, it is. Probably the key difference. So when we look at categories of referral, we are absolutely in line with the national picture. The difference is here in Hampshire, because of the size of our population, and I would also say because of the very proactive way in which we work, the overall volume of referrals is higher. Now that's to be expected. We are a large county, but I think also it is very positive that we're very much on the front foot in terms of the awareness that we have across our communities and the work that we do in a very proactive sense. One of the things that I would point to, and I think this is something that we can, I hope, be justly proud of. So as a local authority, we rolled out e-learning, which was awareness raising across all of our directly employed staff. So the best part of some 12,000 staff within Hampshire County Council. And we had about a 98% completion rate. So just in terms of the organisation's appetite to engage in this agenda, really, really positive. It then, though, will inevitably drive referral rates, but they are absolutely in line.
Graham, thank you very much. The further members of questions? Just for me, then, Graham, please. And you sort of answered some of that, and I understand why not be able to answer this fully, but interested in what we are doing as Hampshire County Council to reduce the risk of terror attacks in Hampshire.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really key question. And again, I would point, Chairman, to some of the comments you've made earlier in terms of the way in which we work in partnerships. And collaboration here is absolutely key. As a local authority, we have a number of duties that fall within the overall contest requirements set by government in terms of supporting residents and hopefully reducing and mitigating the risk that may come from radicalisation in its many forms. So some of the work that we do, for example, is we work very closely with the Office for Homeland Security. We work with Counter-Terrorism Policing South East. We work with local partners, Hampshire Constabulary. We also work closely with the Met Police, particularly when we're thinking about things like county lines. And it's important to point out that lots of organised criminal activity is a commercial model with particular purposes, and particular purposes actually may be in promulgation of particular ideologies, some of which come through within the Prevent agenda. Yeah? Organised crime, commercial model, way of generating money to support different ideologies, not only people living wealthy lives in various places. So we connect into all of those kinds of networks. So some of the work, and I've referred to this already to some degree, awareness raising across our employed staff, but also work that we do in terms of use of our own venues, who they're being hired out to, who they're being used by. And that's a duty in common with all public bodies. We've also got a range of further partnership activities that we undertake in terms of promulgating positive messaging and ensuring that we're supporting partner agencies. I could go on, but I won't.
Graham, thank you very much. And the only comment I would make in terms of what you've just said as well, I think I practically said through every agenda item, the amount of work that goes on within the authority that is hidden, and people don't realise of the good work that goes on literally 24 hours a day in some cases. So thank you very much for that. So no further questions, I don't think, from members, no. So I'll take us to the recommendations as set out on page 167. All happy to agree with that? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Graham. So that brings us to the end of the meeting, and it just leaves me to say this is the last Cabinet meeting of the year, so I'd just like to wish all the thousands of people watching online a very happy holidays and a very happy new year for 2023. Thank you all very much, and I'll ask for the recording to be stopped, please. Thank you very much, and can you let me know? Thank you very much.